behalf of Vincular, I would like to warmly welcome you to today's webinar on India's transition to IEC 62368-1. My name is Ishita Joshi and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We have an insightful session planned with industry experts who will help us understand what this transition means for manufacturers, importers, brands, and compliance professionals. So, without further delay, let's begin. For those who are joining a Vincular webinar for the first time, let me briefly introduce our organization. Vincular is one of India's leading regulatory compliance consulting company. Since 2012, we have been helping businesses meet regulatory requirements and achieve compliance with confidence. Our services include regulatory consulting, product approvals, certification support, risk assessment, policy guidance, and compliance management across sectors such as electronics, IT equipment, wireless and telecommunications, medical devices, renewable energy, waste management, and more. The next slide provides an overview of the services offered under the Vincular umbrella. We will also be sharing the presentation deck and webinar recording with all participants after the session. Now, let's take a quick look at what we have planned for today. As we know, India is moving towards the adoption of IEC 62368-1, and this transition brings important changes for the industry. During this session, our experts will explain the scope and applicability of the standard and help you understand which product categories are covered. We will also discuss key changes introduced in Edition 4 and how it differs from the legacy safety standards that many manufacturers are currently following. Further, we'll walk through the new testing requirements, implementation expectations, important compliance timelines, and migration requirements that organizations need to be aware of. For businesses already holding BIS licenses, as well as those planning to apply for certification, our experts will share practical guidance on how to prepare for a smooth transition. We'll also cover the newly released series guidelines from MIT and discuss their impact on product compliance and certification. And of course, we'll wrap up the session with a live Q&A where our speakers will answer your questions and share practical insights based on their industry experience. Throughout the webinar, you can also submit your questions using the Q&A panel. Our team will try to answer some questions during the session, while the remaining questions will be taken up during the Q&A discussion towards the end. So, now comes one of the most important parts of today's session, introducing our esteemed speakers. We are privileged to have Mr. Varghese Joy with us today. Mr. Joy is the former Scientist G and Deputy Director General at the Bureau of Indian Standards. With an outstanding career spanning 37 years, he has played a significant role in shaping India's certification and conformity assessment ecosystem. His expertise includes product certification, standardization, accreditation, and international compliance frameworks. Mr. Joy, may I request you to begin the session, please? The virtual stage is yours. Over to you, sir.
The structure of Bureau of Indian Standards, the quality control order, what is the importance of this quality control order, and then what are the standards formulation activity in BIS, and how you can interact with the BIS or get solution to your problems by interacting with the BIS. And more methodology and complaints part, how you should comply, will be given in the following sessions. Bureau of Indian Standards, formerly known as Indian Standards Institution, was set up in 1947, and that's the year we got the freedom too. Later, in 1986, originally it was set up in the form of a society. Later on, in 1986, through an act, Bureau of Indian Standards became a statutory body. And in the following years, BIS has taken over all the liabilities and assets of Indian Standards Institution. The basic objective of the organization, the Bureau of Indian Standard, is to develop standards and also to promote the standardization activity. And because of the efforts over a period of so many decades, it has helped industries to transfer the benefits of development of technology, ultimately benefiting the manufacturers, consumers, and ultimately the society itself. Setting up of this organization has definitely helped a lot of industries in India as well as abroad to adopt quickly the principles of quality, compatibility, portability, and safety in general. Today, the organization expanded to many objectives and functions and functioning throughout India. Along with the objectives of standardization, BIS also got one of the important objectives of certification. And certification is more or less is controlled by the Conformity Regulation 2018. And one of the main objectives of BIS is to carry out testing, inspection, certification activities. This activity is regulated under this Conformity Assessment Regulation. The structure of BIS. Today, BIS is operating through various branches all over India with its headquarters at New Delhi. There are a number of laboratories and branches all over India. However, there are no international branches for BIS outside India. All the domestic certifications are operated through its domestic branches and regional offices spread across India. The FMCS, Foreign Manufacturer Certification Scheme, and the Conformity Assessment Scheme, except for the ISMR, are being operated through the headquarters only. So in this case, it is going to be operated only with the headquarters. As I told you that BIS is the national standards body of India. So it represents India in the international committees of ISO as well as IEC. Whenever any standards are published by ISO or IEC, these are adopted at the national level after technical deliberations and wide circulation and acceptance by the Indian experts. India BIS standards formulation process. India is a big country and the process of standardization adopted in India is a consensus approach. That means the interest of all people are taken into consideration before adopting a document as national standard. This process will definitely take time because all views of all people have to be considered, and then it is to be debated and then to be decided actually whether it should be accepted or not and form part of the standard. As on today, there are more than 1,300 technical committees in BIS, and in each committee, mostly BIS have got around 25 to 40 experts of that field in the committee. Basically, there are 16 industry sectors. The standard formulation activities are divided into 16 sectors for convenience, and this matches with the ISO IEC categorization. The technical committees are under these sectors. Review of standards. Normally, Indian standards are reviewed every 3 to 5 years. However, amendments can be issued or published as and when required by the industry, or when there is a change in technology or there is a change demanded by the industry which is required in the society or for the Indian conditions. One of the aim of standardization throughout the world is to harmonize the standards. Harmonization of Indian standards with ISO IEC. Standards are also revised to harmonize with the international standards for removing the trade barriers. This helps in reducing the trade barriers and help the industries to have a better business. That is because India is a signatory to WTO agreement on TBT. India being a signatory to WTO agreement on TBT, all changes are notified and sufficient time is given to other countries to represent any difficulty in implementing before incorporating these changes. Regulatory measures in India. BIS Act 2016. It opened powers of central government to regulate products, process, services and systems. Till 2017, India was not having many technical regulations. Globally, many sectors are regulated, but there were many unregulated sectors in India. For example, medical sectors, medical devices, chemicals, telecom sector, textile sector, machineries and toys were not regulated. In 2017 only, more or less actually the regulations started flowing up and implementation started improving in India. Migration to IEC 62368-1. Quality Control Order by MIT, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. I have told you that under the BIS Act, any ministry of India can issue any regulation and which can be implemented through BIS. BIS can be made as a regulator. The Act and rules gives the provisions for that. We can make regulations only against the Indian standards. So ISO standards need to be adopted as Indian standards, and all international equivalent Indian standards are denoted by ISO. Today we are discussing the Quality Control Order issued or notified by the MIT. MIT is the Information Technology, Electronics and Information Technology Ministry, issued on 29th October 2025 under the Electronics and Information Technology Goods Order 2028. Accordingly, BIS also issued number of guidelines, and the latest one is on 9th March 2026. It replaces IS 13252 Part 1 2010 and IS 616-2017 with a concurrent running period of 6 months, almost equal to 6 months, ending on 1st November 2028. The change has happened, a transition from the construction-based safety to hazard-based safety approach. Common standard for ICT and audio visual equipment, what are the basic difference between these two standards? In my opinion, the main technical shift is that while IS 13252 is a prescriptive legacy safety standard, while IEC 62368-1 uses the hazard-based safety engineering approach focused on energy sources and risk control. Maybe if you had heard me actually in the previous talk, the webinar, once we talked about this, and I talked more about the risk measures to be taken while we introduce a product into the market. In practice, IEC 62368-1 is a broader, more design flexible and better suited to modern AV ICT products that blend functions and technology. I should say this standard is a boon to the manufacturers. Global compliance. This is a requirement. Now, why it's a requirement? Because climatic conditions and usage and inputs vary from place to place and consumer to consumer. Hence, it is necessary that the products we manufacture and sell anywhere takes care of all the practical conditions such as the hazards which can arise from the use and misuse also. So we adopt a technology neutral, adaptable to innovation standard. This methodology and standard centrally places more responsibility on the manufacturer, but at the same time reduces the product liability. There's a shift towards the manufacturer to take more responsibility because at the time of design creation itself, the risk assessment is carried out and ensure the product conforms to the basic safety requirements. For manufacturers, the compliance burden shifts from the build to checklist to demonstrate safety by design and testing. That usually means more emphasis on the product architecture, energy classification, temperature limits, fire safeguards, batteries, and user accessible hazard controls. In India, that is why the migration from 13252 to ISIEC 62368 is being treated as a formal transition rather than a simple paper work. A small history about the ISIEC 62368. IEC standard is prepared by the IEC Technical Committee 108. TC 108 is the technical committee under the IEC. Correspondingly, in BIS, this subject is dealt by Electronics Division LITD 07. BIS is also a participating member in the TC 108. This standard, IEC 62368, has undergone many changes after its introduction in 2010. And what we are talking now is 2023 edition 4 standard. This is the edition that the 4th edition, 2023 version, was adopted by BIS, and that is the one which is being talked today. This standard covers primarily safety, and this quality control order presently covers AV, IT, business and office machines rated voltage up to 600 volts. It is also applicable for components, sub-assemblies of the above equipment. Totally, there are 38 categories impacted under this quality control order. 13 categories under the IS 616 and 25 categories under the IS 13252. Totally, there are 38 categories which have been impacted by the new change. There's a relief measure for the manufacturers or people who are connected with these products. In case you find any difficulty in implementing this standard for any valid technical reasons, or because of the conditions prevailing in the country, or because of any technical fault, require a change in the specification requirements, then you can write to this committee, LITD 07, giving your valid, verifiable reasons with details, and they will examine and may even give an opportunity to present yourself in the committee, and later on this will be taken up by the committee to decide whether any amendment is required. So there is always a relief measure in case you find any difficulty. The complaints methodology. Complaints methodology for the IEC standard in India is basically a migration and revalidation process. For the new applicants, BIS says application can still be processed under the old standards only during the concurrent running window, that is up to 1st November. But after that, this window will be closed and no license can be issued under the old standards. There's no point in testing as per the old standard now, because after 6 months you will have to change over to the revised standard. But if it is already under test, you get the standard and get it changed to get it migrated to the revised standard. In practice, this is a document plus testing workflow, not just a self-declaration. You need product classification, testing evidence, series model justification, and portal submission, all aligned before the transition. All should be aligned before the deadline of transition. I close here, and more details of complaints methodology and series guidelines will be given in the next session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Joy, for that insightful presentation. Moving forward, let us invite Mr. Bal Mukund Vyas. I would like to introduce him to discuss the technicalities involved. Mr. Vyas is a seasoned techno-commercial leader with over 35 years of experience in the testing, inspection, and certification industry. He currently serves as the Chief Scientific Officer at Yadav Measurements and is an impaneled NABL lead assessor. His expertise spans product safety, EMI AMC testing, accreditation, and standards development. Over to you, Mr. Vyas.
Okay, thank you, and good morning and good afternoon, everybody from Udaipur. I will talk about the differences between the IEC 62368-1 with respect to the legacy standards IEC 60950 and IS 616, and with respect to the edition 3 of IEC 62368-1. So the latest standard is edition 4. As very nicely explained by Dr. Varghese, the legacy standards, which were IEC 60950 and IS 616, which was equivalent to IEC 60065, They were actually having rule-based safety approach. They were less flexible with respect to new technologies because they were more of the prescriptive rather than being specifying the safety approach. And they were basically based on preventing access to hazardous parts. The new series, which is IEC 62368-1, is hazard-based safety approach, is flexible for new technologies, which is very good for manufacturers, based on concept of identifying the energy sources, classifying hazards. I would request to please switch on to the first slide, please. Slide, yeah, thank you very much. So this is having the IEC 62368-1 is having hazard-based safety approach, flexible for new technologies, based on concept of identifying the energy sources, then classifying the hazards, what hazards can be created, and then applying the safeguards against those hazards. The standard covers different types of energy sources, which is from electrical, mechanical, power, which is power is also from electrical, but then power can cause heating and can cause fire, so it is bit of separate dealing is there. Then radiation hazard, then chemical hazard, and the thermal hazard. So these type of hazards are considered in the standards. Now the energy from the source needs to be transferred to the body to cause a hazard, which requires an energy transfer medium. So from product to the body, which is under the question of the safety, there has to be the energy has to be transferred from the inside of the product to the body. Now the body can respond in different ways, and the hazards or the energy sources are classified into three types. The class 1 is not painful but can be detectable. Class 2 is painful but it does not cause an injury, and class 3 is the one which causes the injury. So depending on the class, the safety safeguards are specified and are required. Now I will talk about the important changes which has been incorporated in edition 4 with respect to edition 3. The edition 3 was published of IEC 62368. Edition 3 was published in 2018. So many of you might already have gone through the edition 3. So what are important changes which in edition 4 with respect to the edition 3? So the first one I want to talk about is clause 4.1.1, which is related to the components and sub-assemblies of the product. Now, in edition 4, the components and sub-assembly as per legacy standards are not allowed. So this is very important change. In edition 3, components and sub-assembly that complies with the legacy standard. Legacy standards are 60950-1 or 60065 were acceptable. But in edition 4, this paragraph has been removed, and that relaxation which was given up to edition 3 has now been removed, and all the components and sub-assembly should be certified as per edition 4. The next change is related to the equipment with coin and button cells. The clause is now not applicable for equipment for which it is unlikely that a coin or button cell battery will be removed by children due to the location of the battery within the equipment. So equipment has been designed in such a way that there is an unlikely situation of the hazard. The clause 4.8.3, which is related to the constructional requirement, has been better elaborated to ensure that coin button cell is not accessible to children. For example, a minimum of 2 full rotation of the screw or fastener are required to open or remove the coin or button cell battery compartment. For a cover which is secured by one or more latches, a minimum torque of 0.5 Nm is required to release the latches. And if no tool is required to remove the coin or button cell battery compartment, the application of a minimum of 2 different interdependent movements or the application of simultaneous movement to engage 2 mechanisms requiring the use of multiple fingers. So these are changes with respect to coin and button cells. The next is related to clause 4.1.8, which talks about liquid fill components. So in this edition 4, the limit of 1 liter has been removed. In edition 3, it was mentioned that for liquid fill components with liquid more than 1 liter, the clause G.15 is not applicable. However, in edition 4, this statement has been removed, making clause G.15 applicable for equipments containing liquid more than 1 liter also. The clause G.15 specifies various mechanical and thermal tests for liquid containers to ensure no leakage under various conditions and thermal cycling test. The next change is related to the allowed temperature limit for wireless power transfer devices. In clause 9.6.3, the allowed temperature limit has been increased. The test method has been better elaborated to ensure repeatable results between 2 different labs. In edition 3, the maximum temperature limit of 70 degrees centigrade was specified for foreign objects. Also, no criteria for temperature rise of transmitter was specified. However, in edition 4, the temperature of the foreign objects shall not exceed 85 degrees centigrade for the steel disc, 120 degrees centigrade for the aluminum ring, and 155 degrees centigrade for aluminum foil. And the temperature of the transmitter shall not exceed TS2 limit specified in the table 37. Next change is related to the wearable devices touch limits in clause 9.3.1. In edition 4, the wearable devices specified as same temperature limits for TS1 and TS2 with same temperature limits for both TS1 and TS2, while in edition 3, it was specified in TS1 only. The next important change is related to the operating condition for equipments with specific output conditions in Annexure B. In edition 4 requires that the proper loads are connected. So this clause requires that if equipment needs specific load condition to turn on supply output and keep it active for the test, the required load or simulated load shall be applied to ensure that applicable energy sources are active during the testing, to ensure that the product is safe and the testing is done correctly. The next change is related to equipments having batteries and protection circuit as described in Annexure M.4. In the title for this clause in edition 3 was additional safeguards for equipment containing a portable secondary lithium battery. In edition 4, the word portable has been removed. So this makes that it is applicable for non-portable batteries also. In clause M.4.1, specific requirements for stationary equipment has also been added. A detailed test method is included to ensure consistency of the test results between the laboratory. Remember, these changes which I have mentioned are only important changes, and there might be some few more changes also. Now this table actually gives a comparison of the IEC 62368-1 test methods with respect to the test methods which are specified in the legacy standard. So the first one is limited current circuit test. This is not required in the IEC 62368-1 and is replaced by evaluation as energy sources. This was required in 13252, but it was not required in IS 616. Similarly, the current and power input test, the test method is different in all three standards. The limited power source, the test method is different. Clearance and creepage values, the values had been reduced. This is very important change with respect to IEC 62368-1 with respect to the values specified in the legacy standards. The fault condition test, fault selected based on the safeguard failure. So this is also another very important change in the IEC 62368. Insulation resistance test is required in the IEC 62368-1. It was not required in the legacy standard 13252, while it was required in IEC 616. Antenna port surge test is required. Vibration test is required only in special case. And the temperature rise test limits. The temperature limits depend on safeguard type, material class, and touch temperature concepts. The touch current and the leakage current limits are required, and test method change from other two standards. So these are the important changes in the IEC 62368-1 edition 4 with respect to the edition 3 and the legacy standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vyas, for sharing your valuable insights. Now, to conclude the presentation segment, I would like to invite Ms. Medha Bhatt to share her perspectives. Ms. Bhatt is a regulatory compliance professional specializing in BIS and BEE certification. With over 7 years of experience, she has worked closely with manufacturers and brands, helping them navigate certification requirements and regulatory changes. Today, she will share practical insights on implementation requirements and recent developments related to IEC 62368-1. Over to you, Ms. Bhatt.
Now, let us turn our attention to the key dates followed by BIS preparedness for the implementation of the new standard. First and foremost, the most important date to note is 1st November 2028. I repeat, 1st November 2028. It's the implementation date of the new standard. This date also marks the end of the parallel running period of the existing standard, namely IS 13252 for information and technology products and IS 616 for audio-video products. In short, after 1st November 28, IS 13252 and IS 616 shall not remain valid, and only IEC 62368 Part 1 will remain operative. For your information, the slide also reflects the other important date associated with this transition, so please have a look. As we look at the migration readiness from the BIS perspective, the foundation has already been firmly established. Over the past few months, BIS has systematically rolled out all the key building blocks required for a smooth transition. The department has published UTRF, which stands for Uniform Test Report Format, issued the detailed implementation guideline for both existing and new applicants, and introduced the series guideline to streamline the model grouping. Additionally, TRF, which stands for Test Request Form, is now available, allowing original equipment manufacturer to initiate sample booking seamlessly. Equally important, BIS has approved a network of accredited local and international labs capable of conducting testing under the new framework. In summary, the regulatory framework, the testing infrastructure, documentation system, and operational processes are all in process. This means that the migration pathway is not only defined but also ready for the industry participation. Therefore, all OEMs and brands may now start preparing for fresh registration under the new standard and migration of existing registered product to 62368. Moving ahead, let us understand the implementation guideline from the perspective of existing applicants who are already registered in BIS portal. As mentioned earlier, applicants whose products have already been tested and registered under the existing standard are required to complete the transition to 62368 no later than 1st November 28. For this transition, all lead models must be tested in accordance with 62368 standard. Thereafter, the application along with the test report and the prescribed undertaking must be submitted through the standard revision option available on the BIS portal. In continuation to this, in case of series model, no additional testing is needed and will be added in the test report basis the series formation guideline. However, the license will be required to submit a declaration confirming that all series model follow the series guideline as per 62368. Important point to be noted here that if compliance is not achieved within the prescribed timeline before 1st November 28, BIS may initiate cancellation of the license or remove the concerned model or model series from the scope of registration. Upon successful completion of the migration process, BIS will issue a grant letter covering all approved models. There is another scenario in BIS where a product is required to comply with multiple standards for products that are subject to additional standard or regulatory requirement such as television set under IS 18112, mobile phones under IS 16333 Part 3 and CCTV products under ER01, and additional compliance consideration need to be taken into account. In that case, if the migration to 62368 cause any product changes that may affect product safety, additional testing according to the relevant standard must be conducted, and the corresponding test report must also be required to be submitted. However, if the product is unchanged from the previously approved version, then a compliance declaration for the additional applicable standard will be sufficient and no additional testing will be required. Now, let us look at to the guidelines from the new applicant lenses. Application where testing is already in process may continue under the old standard. Similarly, applications that have already been submitted can also continue under the old standard until 1st November 28. However, beyond 1st November 28, no license will be granted under the old standard. Now, let us move on to one of the interesting segment in this series, that is the new series or grouping guideline. One of the key highlights of the new framework is the release of the MIghty series or grouping guideline. MIghty has laid down a well-defined and comprehensive approach to model grouping, structured around two key components. First, the common criteria applicable across all the product categories, and second, product-specific criteria applicable to particular product categories. Key point to note is a product series will qualify only when it meets both common and the relevant product specific criteria. Let's look at some notable changes in the common criteria, which is being reflected in the left side of the presentation. First comes the IP rating. All models grouped within the same series must have same IP rating. What's changed in this testing requirement is IP rating must now be verified as per IEC 60529 at a BIS recognized lab. Earlier, IEC 60529 test report issued by international labs were acceptable, but under the new framework, only test reports from the BIS recognized lab will be considered valid. This marks a clear shift towards greater reliance on domestic BIS recognized testing infrastructure. Next, the same enclosure. Historically, primary parameter for gauging compliance were enclosure material and certain permissible aesthetic modification. However, in the current framework, MIghty has comprehensively defined enclosure guideline along with the specific exemption with a greater focus on the factors like surface treatment, shape, design, dimension, and mechanical class construction. Moving on, then there is same class of construction, same energy source, type, and so on. Now, let's move on to the right side of the slide comprising of product-specific criteria. Reiterating, beyond the common requirements, product must also satisfy category-specific conditions like same type of microphone and earphone like clip type or handheld type are required to be grouped differently, and similarly few more product categories has its own defined grouping parameters. For complete understanding, stakeholders are encouraged to refer to the official series or grouping guideline.
So before we conclude today's session, I would like to share that based on the many requests we have received, we are hosting another expert-led webinar on one of the most talked about topics in the industry today, ComSec compliance under NCCS. If this topic is relevant to your business and you would like to attend, we encourage you to register for the webinar. The registration link and webinar details will be shared in the chat box. Coming back to today's session, I would like to sincerely thank our speakers for taking the time to share their knowledge. I would also like to thank each one of you for joining us today and for your active participation throughout the webinar. At Vincular, we remain committed to supporting manufacturers, importers, and brands through every stage of compliance, from applicability assessment and documentation review to testing support, certification assistance, and migration planning. We can also help with pre-compliance evaluation and gap assessments to identify potential issues before formal certification testing. Thank you once again for being with us today. We hope to see you again in our upcoming webinar. Have a wonderful day ahead and stay compliant.